he screamed at me. I didn't understand why. Whoo! Wait a second, did you hear that? That's Paedon Brown, one of Kody's oldest kids, opening up about something that, honestly, we've never heard so plainly before. I mean, this is huge, right? We've all seen the tension on sister wives between Kody and his kids, but to hear it from Paedon himself, that's another level, okay? Take a minute to process that. We're talking about one of the most visible Brown kids, and he's saying that Kody, his dad, literally screamed at him as a child. And you know what? I think this might explain a lot about some of the dynamics we've seen on the show, especially how the kids interact with him now. So yeah, that's the tea. But stick with me, because there's a lot more under the surface here than just one shocking confession. Hey besties, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into something seriously shocking. Paedon Brown has claimed that Kody Brown screamed at him when he was a child. And honestly, this is not just a little family disagreement we're talking about. This is big. Now, I know we've seen Kody on sister wives act strict or even controlling at times, but hearing this straight from Paedon, it adds a whole new layer to the family dynamics. Today, we're going to break down exactly what Paedon said, why this is a huge deal, and what it reveals about Kody's relationships with his kids, especially the older ones who have been more vocal over the years. And yes, I'll be giving my own take, pointing out patterns we've seen over the years, and explaining why this might not be just a one-off incident. So, grab your tea, because we're getting into all the details. So, here's the thing. Paedon's claim isn't just a he said, he yelled, moment. There's a deeper theory here that I want to unpack with you. And remember, this is just analysis. Just like we do with everything on Sister Wives, I want to take a moment to connect the dots, because I think what Paedon revealed sheds light on patterns we've been seeing for years in the Brown family. So here's the theory. Kody's behavior toward his kids, especially the older ones, has always been, for lack of a better word, intense. If you go back and watch the older seasons, he's very controlling, very rigid, and sometimes, and this is what I think Paedon is hinting at, he lashes out when things don't go exactly the way he wants, and screaming, well, that's a form of emotional dominance. It's a way to instill fear, to keep his kids in line, or maybe even to try and assert authority in a household with multiple wives and children. Now, think about it. Paedon isn't saying Kody was mean for no reason. He's framing it in a context that shows he didn't understand it at the time, and that, I think, is key. Paedon is giving us insight into the confusion a child feels when a parent's actions don't match their love. He's saying, essentially, I loved my dad, I still do. But this scared me. That's a huge admission. It's vulnerable, it's raw. And it's something viewers have never really gotten from the show because TLC rarely shows the kid's side of these conflicts. But let's take this a step further. If we accept that Kody did scream at Paedon, and let's just assume, for the sake of analysis, that this was a pattern and not an isolated incident, what does that tell us about his parenting style? Well, it reinforces the idea that Kody's control over his family extends beyond just rules about polygamy, or who sleeps where. It's a bigger, more structural issue. He expects obedience. He expects things to happen according to his timeline and standards. And when they don't, he erupts, he yells, he screams. And yes, that can have long-lasting effects on a child who's trying to navigate life in such a unique, high-pressure family setup. Another part of this theory that I think is particularly compelling is that Paedon's statement comes years after the actual incidents. He reflects now as an adult on experiences he had as a child. That means we're not just getting the story of a momentary argument, we are seeing the aftermath, the long-term impact. And when you look at how Paedon interacts with Kody today, the patterns can easily be spotted in their distant interactions. At times tense conversations and a clear desire for boundaries. Here's the kicker. This also fits in with the larger narrative we have seen with Kody and his other kids. Remember those older daughters and sons who have let loose on interviews and social media about frustrations? Well, Paedon's claim may just be the tip of the iceberg, the one story that made it publicly undeniable. It's like pulling a thread. When you tug on this, it starts to unravel a much bigger story about family control, authority, and emotional impact. So yes, this is huge. This isn't just family drama for entertainment. It is a peek into how a parent's behavior, most especially in a polygamist, highly publicized family, can affect children long term. It is also what the cameras never show: the tension behind the scenes, the moments that are intentionally not to be shown, and the emotional scarring that doesn't make it onto reality television. Now that we've set the stage with the theory, let's go into what actually happened and why this is so shocking. Paedon's claim didn't come out of nowhere. There was history here, and context is everything. First, let's rewind a little. For years, viewers have seen Kody as the patriarch that has an iron grip over his wives and kids. But what we never got was a front-row seat to the intensity behind closed doors. The cameras capture the moments, but only those show moments. Things like this, kids being yelled at or emotionally controlled, are almost always left on the cutting room floor. And that's why Paedon speaking out now is such a big deal. According to his statement, Kody screamed at him repeatedly during his childhood. Paedon described situations where he was just trying to follow the rules or meet expectations, and Kody's reaction was extreme: yelling, frustration, and sometimes even threatening tones. Paedon said he didn't understand it as a kid, and honestly, that confusion is what makes it resonate. Many viewers can relate, thinking your parents' anger is about you personally, when really it's about a larger control dynamic in the household. Now, let's connect the dots. Paedon is one of Kody's older children, meaning he grew up during the time when Kody was juggling multiple wives and dozens of children. That's a lot of stress for any parent. But here's the key. Paedon's reaction, fear, confusion, and eventually speaking out, is not about a single lost moment of discipline. It's a pattern, and patterns matter, especially when we look at the dynamics of this family years later. We've seen hints of tension on camera before. Remember moments when the kids seemed uncomfortable around Kody, the sighs, the hesitation before speaking, the awkward pauses during family discussions. Paedon's claim suddenly gives those moments context. It's not just scripted reality television awkwardness. It could be a direct reflection of past emotional strain. And what's interesting is that this claim comes at a time when the Brown family is under more scrutiny than ever. With interviews, social media posts, and side commentary from ex-wives and family friends, more and more pieces of the puzzle are coming together. Paedon's revelation isn't an isolated shocker. It fits into a pattern of emotional challenges that several of Kody's older children have hinted at over the years. Finally, let's consider the ripple effect. Paedon speaking out now has consequences. It forces fans, critics, and even family members to reevaluate what they thought they knew about Kody. Suddenly, the strict but loving dad narrative gets complicated with allegations of yelling, emotional pressure, and a household where children may have grown up in fear of making a mistake. So the context makes Paedon's claim not only shocking but also very significant. We're not talking family drama anymore. We are talking about emotional dynamics that mold the way children relate to their parents, especially in a complex family like the Browns. Now, let's dig in, because this is where it gets really interesting. Paedon's claim about Kody screaming isn't just a single moment of bad parenting. It fits into a larger pattern we've seen over the years with how Kody interacts with his kids. And understanding this pattern helps explain a lot about the family dynamics on Sister Wives. First, let's talk motives. Why would Kody scream at his children? On one level, yes, he is a father trying to maintain control over a huge, complicated family. He has got multiple wives, countless kids, and the constant pressure of keeping everything in line. That is stressful. But stress alone doesn't justify screaming at a child. No, besties, this is about control and authority. Kody has historically demanded obedience, not just in big matters, but in everyday actions, decisions, and even how the kids present themselves on camera. Paedon describing being screamed at as a child tells us something important. Kody may have relied on fear as a tool. Fear that you'll get it wrong. Fear that you'll disappoint him. Fear that you'll disrupt the order he is trying to maintain. And when you live in a household like that, the effects don't just disappear. They linger in how children respond to authority even as adults. Lastly, let's look at the emotional impact. Paedon explicitly said he didn't understand why at that time. That is classic for kids who go through emotional inconsistency. Moments of love and normal family interaction mixed with sudden outbursts of anger. It creates confusion, stress, and sometimes long-term trust issues. And if we look at other Brown children, we see echoes of this. distant relationships with Kody, cautious communication, or even open criticism of his behavior in interviews or on social media. It's not random. It's a pattern. Now, here's something else I've noticed. Kody's parenting style seems to vary between children. Some of the older kids, like Paedon, clearly experienced more intense control, while younger children may have more autonomy or less visible conflict. That could be due to several factors: Kody's evolving personality, the influence of different wives, or simply the logistics of managing so many children over time. But the point is, Paedon's experience is part of a bigger story, a story about authority, expectations, and emotional tension in the Brown family. And then there's the public versus private element. On camera, Kody often appears calm, measured, or even kind. But Paedon's revelation exposes a private reality that viewers rarely see. This isn't a scripted drama. This is a lived experience, and it explains why certain family interactions on the show feel so awkward, tense, or forced. When you've grown up being yelled at by a parent, it changes how you show up in family settings, public interviews, and even social media posts. Finally, let's talk about long-term consequences. Paedon speaking out now, as an adult, shows that these experiences stick with children long after the yelling stops, and it raises questions about Kody's relationships with all his kids. Are the older children still cautious around him? Do they feel emotionally safe? Do they trust his intentions? Paedon's admission suggests the answer is complicated. So in summary, Paedon's story isn't just shocking. It's a window into Kody's long-standing parenting approach, controlling, emotionally charged, and occasionally harmful. And when you look at the larger family picture, it starts to make a lot of previously puzzling behaviors make sense. Now, let's get into the part where we react, because honestly, this is wild. Hearing Paedon say that Kody screamed at him as a child hits different when you consider the emotional and ethical implications. This isn't television drama anymore. It is real-life consequences, and it is hard not to feel for Paedon here. First off, let's be real. Screaming at your child leaves a mark. Even if Kody meant well or thought it was discipline, the impact is emotional. Kids remember that stuff. They internalize it. They question themselves. Am I doing something wrong? Is my dad disappointed in me? And when you are growing up in a household as big and complicated as the Browns, those moments get magnified. It is not just one kid feeling the sting. It is part of a system that is stacked with expectations, rules, and hierarchy. Honestly, watching this as a viewer, it is hard not to feel conflicted. On one hand, Kody has been a father to dozens of kids, provided for them, and navigated a massive family with multiple wives. On the other hand, the screaming, the fear, the confusion it caused Paedon shows a darker side of authority. It raises questions. How much control is too much? At what point does discipline cross into emotional harm? And let's talk about viewer perspective. Many fans have always defended Kody, saying he is a loving patriarch just trying to manage a difficult situation. But Paedon's words challenge that narrative. They force us to acknowledge that there may have been a side of Kody we didn't see. One where fear and control were tools used to manage children, rather than guidance and understanding. That is heavy, and it is uncomfortable. Now, here is a hot take. If cameras had captured moments like this, sister wives might have looked very different. Fans might have been more critical of Kody much earlier, but reality television tends to sanitize conflict, focusing on storylines that are dramatic yet palatable. That's why Paedon speaking now as an adult reflecting back is so important. It fills in the blanks of what was happening off camera. Finally, let's acknowledge the bravery here. Paedon speaking out takes courage. There's always a risk in publicly criticizing a parent, especially one who has lived much of his life in the public eye. But sharing his experience is not just about airing grievances, it is about truth and perspective, and perhaps helping other viewers understand the reality of growing up in the Brown family. So yes, this is emotional, shocking, and complicated. It forces us to confront the human side of reality television families, the messy, imperfect, and sometimes painful side that doesn't make it to air. It also underlines why fans are increasingly invested in these stories, because often the behind-the-scenes reality is far more compelling and more concerning than the screen-scratch drama. Now that we've reacted to Paedon's claim, let's put it in context with other Brown family revelations. This is where it starts to get really interesting because Paedon isn't the only one hinting at tensions or emotional struggles caused by Kody's parenting. First, there was what some of the older kids had said over the years in interviews or social media posts. Mary's kids have occasionally hinted at feeling overlooked or pressured. There has been talk of favoritism, strict rules, and tension that isn't always obvious on camera. And these aren't wild accusations. Many of them line up with what Paedon described. Then, there are statements from Robyn's older children. Some of them have openly shared frustrations with Kody in interviews or Patreon discussions that describe moments of control, emotional intensity, or even outright yelling. Subtle, but when you connect these dots, a pattern emerges. Kody's approach to discipline isn't occasional strictness. It is a recurring dynamic that affects multiple children across the family. And then, of course, there are the ex-wives. Some of them, like Mary and Janelle, have spoken off camera about Kody's parenting style. How he tries to enforce rules strictly, expects compliance, and sometimes responds strongly when kids push back. Again, we're not talking about minor disagreements. We're talking about moments that could leave emotional scars. What's fascinating here is how Paedon's claim reinforces this pattern. By sharing his personal experience of being screamed at, he's essentially confirming what other family members have hinted at over the years. It's the missing piece of the puzzle that helps explain why some of the older Brown kids are more cautious or distant in their relationships with Kody now. And here's another interesting angle, the timing of Paedon speaking out. He's reflecting as an adult. That means he's looking back with perspective, able to identify patterns that he couldn't understand as a child. And that perspective is invaluable because it provides context not just for his own experience, but for the broader family narrative. It also highlights the emotional consequences that don't make it onto reality television. Finally, this supporting info sets the stage for the next piece of our discussion, the impact on Kody's current relationships with his children. If multiple kids have experienced similar dynamics, it explains a lot about why certain family interactions on sister wives feel tense, awkward, or disconnected. It also raises questions about how these past experiences affect trust, communication, and emotional closeness today. So yeah, this isn't just Paedon's story in isolation. It's part of a larger, more complex family narrative that viewers are only now starting to understand. And it makes you wonder how much of what we see on television is just the tip of the iceberg. Now we get to the fun, the hot takes. Because Paedon's claim isn't just shocking, it changes the narrative we've been watching on Sister Wives for years. And let me tell you, it makes you rethink a lot of what we assumed about Kody and his parenting. First, let's address the obvious. Kody's image on television has always been very controlled. He is the patriarch, calm, measured, sometimes even a loving dad archetype. But this revelation from Paedon cracks that image. It shows a side of Kody that we haven't seen. A father who can lash out, scream, and create fear in his children. And that fear, even if it was never intended, has consequences that last long after the yelling stops. Here is my hot take. This claim reframes how we view every single tense moment between Kody and his older kids. Think about all the awkward pauses, the hesitant smiles, or the faraway interactions we've seen on camera. Suddenly, they make sense. They're not just television awkwardness or scripted reality drama. They're the echoes of a childhood shaped by yelling and fear. And that is heavy, right? Hot take number 2. This could also explain some of the loyalty dynamics with the family. Some children seem closer with certain wives or step-parents. Others maintain distance from Kody. If their upbringing partially included yelling and emotional intensity, it is understandable why some of the older children have those protective boundaries now. Paedon speaking up about his family gives us context we didn't have before, and it is kind of mind-blowing when you put the pieces together. Now, let's take a second to talk about what this does to the narrative of the actual show. Sister Wives has always positioned this polygamy family drama as quirky, complicated, and often fun. But this from Paedon places a reminder to viewers that real-life emotional stakes exist outside the cameras. It adds some layers of depth to the storyline. And if TLC included more of this context, the show would feel dramatically different. We'd be watching not just plural marriage chaos, but the emotional consequences of parenting in a high-pressure multi-family household. And here's the thing, the ripple effect doesn't stop with Paedon. Once you begin to connect his story with experiences hinted at by other Brown children and ex-wives, the narrative shifts. Kody isn't just a strict or controlling dad anymore. He becomes a complex, flawed patriarch, one whose choices have shaped the family in lasting ways. And honestly, the complexity is what makes reality television addictive. It is messy, uncomfortable, and totally human. Finally, let's tip our hat to the emotional honesty here. Paedon's claim is brave, and it forces viewers to confront uncomfortable truths. It is not just gossip, it is a look into the long-term emotional impact of family dynamics. And for fans who thought they knew the Brown family story, it is a wake-up call. There is much more happening beneath the surface than what we see on television. Now let's go to the present. Paedon's claim provides a lens to analyze Kody's current relationships with his kids, especially the older ones who grew up experiencing this emotional intensity. And honestly, it helps explain a lot of what we see or don't see on the show. First, let's talk about Paedon himself. Even as an adult, there is a noticeable caution in the way he interacts with Kody. He is respectful, polite, but you can see the boundaries. That makes sense if you fill in a childhood with yelling or emotional outbursts. Adults who grow up like that tend to keep people at arm's length for protection, and that pattern seems to play out with Paedon. Now, consider the older daughters and sons. Some of them have been quite outspoken in interviews, social media, and even Patreon discussions. They hint at frustration, emotional strain, and sometimes resentment toward Kody. Paedon's claim is a thread that weaves all those hints into a coherent story. The older kids might maintain caution, sometimes strained relationships with their father, because of repeated emotional pressure during formative years. Here's the thing, Kody's parenting style seems to have some serious long-term implications for trust and communication. Some kids are hesitant to open up, others choose distance over confrontation, and a few are pretty choosy about what they share publicly. Of course, this doesn't make Kody a bad dad across the board. Remember, he has provided for dozens of children, managed a very complex household, and has maintained some close relationships. But it does mean that his approach has created emotional complexity, especially with the older kids who remember being yelled at or feeling pressured. And let's not ignore the younger children. They might have a different experience because Kody's parenting style has evolved, or perhaps the family dynamics are simply different now. But the contrast in the way the older versus younger kids relate to Kody is telling. It is a reminder that childhood experiences, particularly negative emotional ones, like yelling, leave impressions on family relationships that may last for years. Finally, consider the ripple effect on the family as a whole. If the older children are cautious or distant, it can influence how the younger ones perceive authority, communication, and even family loyalty. Paedon's revelation isn't just about him, it is about the way patterns of behavior echo through an entire family. And when you tie that back to the sister-wives narrative, it explains why some interactions feel tense or why certain storylines feel unresolved. In short, Paedon's childhood experience helps us understand the emotional landscape of the Brown family today. It is messy, it is complicated, and it is very human. But it also explains a lot about the tension and dynamics we've been watching on screen for years. Now that we have looked at current relationships between Paedon and Kody, zoom out and take a look at the patterns across multiple Brown children. Because the claim he made isn't an isolated incident, it is part of a greater trend that we can actually see when we piece together the history of the family. First, think about the older daughters. A few of them have been pretty vocal, be it in interviews or on social media, about feeling pressured, controlled, or unheard by Kody. They have hinted at emotional strain, favoritism, or even moments of fear in the household. If you connect these accounts with Paedon's story, then a pattern comes out. Kody seems to use emotional intensity, including yelling, as one of his tools for enforcing obedience or maintaining control. Consider the sons. There have been moments on camera where they seem hesitant around Kody, avoid confrontation, or second-guess themselves when he's present. Again, this echoes Paedon's description of confusion and fear as a child. It's not just one-off behavior, it's consistent across multiple children, which points to an established parenting style rather than a singular lapse in judgment. Now, on to the younger generation. Some of them appear to have a slightly different dynamic with Kody. Maybe he has learned to approach them differently. Or perhaps the family structure has made a conscious shift to reduce conflict. But here's the key. Patterns often leave marks, and older siblings' experiences inevitably bleed into the younger ones. They witness emotional intensity, yelling, or favoritism, and that can affect how they perceive authority and family hierarchy. And let's not forget the wives' roles. Some ex-wives and current wives have spoken off camera about Kody's intensity and strictness, especially with older children. They've described moments where he pushed boundaries, enforced rules rigidly, or reacted strongly when children didn't meet expectations. These supporting accounts add more weight to Paedon's claim and reinforce the idea of a recurring pattern rather than an isolated event. So, what does this pattern tell us? It tells us that Kody's approach, strict, controlling, and emotionally intense, has shaped his children's relationships with him in lasting ways. Paedon speaking out now just shines a light on a system that's been in place for decades. And when you consider Sister Wives fans who have speculated about tense interactions on camera, this pattern finally gives context. Those awkward moments, hesitant conversations, and subtle distance aren't random. They're the echoes of a parenting style built on control and emotional intensity. Finally, this pattern sets the stage for understanding long-term family consequences, not just for Paedon but for all of Kody's children. It also begs questions around emotional health, trust, and how family dynamics continue to evolve behind the scenes. Now that we've examined the patterns, let's talk about the potential impact of Paedon's revelation, both on him personally and on the Brown family as a whole. This is where things get really heavy, because these are real consequences that extend beyond reality television drama. First, for Paedon personally, speaking out about your childhood, especially when it involves a parent like Kody, is incredibly brave. He's exposing vulnerability, acknowledging past pain, and challenging a public figure in his family. That takes courage, but it also opens up potential backlash from fans who love Kody, from media outlets who may misinterpret or sensationalize his words, and even from family members who might be defensive. Emotionally, this could be a form of healing for Paedon. By naming his experiences, he's validating his own feelings and creating space to process them. It's also an invitation for the family to acknowledge the impact of past actions, which could lead to reconciliation or at the very least understanding. But we also have to recognize the risk of reopening old wounds for both him and Kody, especially if public reaction is intense now for the Brown family. Paedon's revelation could force a broader conversation about parenting, control, and emotional dynamics in the household. Other siblings might feel validated, which could strengthen bonds among them, or it could bring tension if they disagree on how Kody's behavior is perceived. Either way, it shines a spotlight on family dynamics that have been largely hidden from viewers. There's also the public impact. Sister Wives fans and critics are going to dissect this claim, compare it with past behaviors, and analyze every interaction Kody has had with his children on camera. This could affect Kody's reputation, particularly among fans who have long admired him as a father figure. And let's be honest, reputation matters, especially in a family so intertwined with reality television storytelling. Finally, this revelation could influence the future of family interactions. Will Kody acknowledge his past behavior? Will the children, including Paedon, set new boundaries? Or will this escalate tensions? There are no easy answers. But one thing is clear. Paedon speaking out opened the door to conversations about emotional health, accountability, and the long-term results of parenting style. In other words, this isn't just gossip or drama, it is a turning point for understanding the emotional realities of growing up in a complex, high-profile family like the Browns, and it could have ripple effects for years to come. Now, let's talk about the fan reaction, because once Paedon's claim hit the internet, things absolutely exploded. And honestly, this is where we see the real power of social media in shaping public perception of the Brown family. First off, fans were shocked. Many longtime viewers expressed empathy for Paedon, saying things like, "I can't believe he had to go through that as a kid," or "It makes so much sense why the older kids act the way they do now." People are connecting his experience to moments we've seen on Sister Wives, awkward interactions, tense conversations, and distant body language, and it is resonating with viewers who may have picked up on these subtle signs but didn't know the backstory. Then there is the controversy. Some fans have defended Kody, saying raising dozens of kids in a polygamist household is stressful, and that yelling occasionally doesn't make him a bad parent. Others, however, are calling out the emotional intensity as unacceptable, emphasizing that children should feel safe and supported, not scared of their parents' reactions. And honestly, both perspectives are part of the conversation. This is nuanced, and that is what makes it so compelling. To fans, social media in particular has been buzzing with memes, threads, and video reactions, all analyzing Paedon's story. Viewers are debating the ethics of raising children in high-pressure or strict environments, and how fear-based discipline can have lasting effects. Paedon's claim has become a lens for exploring these larger issues. It's no longer just about the Browns, it's about the real-life consequences of parenting approaches in any family. Finally, this fan engagement also amplifies the pressure on the family. With thousands of viewers analyzing every interaction, every interview, and every social media post, Kody and the other Browns are now facing scrutiny that goes far beyond the television screen. It's a public reckoning of sorts, one that forces accountability or at the very least reflection. In short, the reaction isn't just shock and drama. It's an evolving conversation about family, emotional well-being, and how past behavior shapes the present. Paedon's claim has tapped into something much larger than reality television gossip, and that's why it's resonating so strongly with viewers. Now let's take a look at how Paedon's revelation could impact the future of Sister Wives, both on screen and behind the scenes. This is where the story really shifts from past events to potential future consequences. First, the storylines. Sister Wives has always relied on family tension to create drama, but now there's a whole new layer of real emotional stakes. Viewers already know about disagreements, polygamy challenges, and awkward family moments, but Paedon's claim adds historical context. It reframes how we interpret interactions with Kody on camera. Producers may lean into this dynamic, showing more honest conversations between Kody and his children, or exploring how past conflicts influence present relationships. Second, consider the family dynamics. Paedon speaking out publicly could encourage other children to express their own experiences. We might see more siblings addressing Kody's past behavior, which could either strengthen relationships through understanding or create tension if Kody reacts defensively. Either way, it's a turning point for the family, one that could change how they interact on screen and off. Next, there's viewer perception. Fans who previously viewed Kody as a calm, loving patriarch may now have a more complex view of him, one that acknowledges flaws, mistakes, and emotional intensity. That shift could influence how audiences engage with the show, which storylines gain attention, and even which family members are supported in social media discussions. And here's an interesting angle. This revelation might also affect casting and story planning. Producers may want to explore family therapy, past traumas, or reconciliation efforts as part of future episodes that could make the show even more compelling. Not just for the drama, but for the emotional truth behind the storylines. It could even encourage younger children or spouses to share their perspectives, expanding the narrative beyond what's been seen before. Finally, let's talk about legacy. Sister Wives isn't just a television show, it's a family chronicle. Paedon's revelation adds a permanent layer to that story. Future viewers will see the family through a lens that includes real struggles, emotional growth, and the consequences of parenting choices. It also raises awareness about the complexities of large, high-profile families and the emotional nuances we often overlook on reality television. So yes, this isn't just a shocking headline. It's a pivotal moment for the Browns, for Sister Wives, and for the viewers who follow their journey. It's going to influence storylines, relationships, and public perception for years to come. And honestly, it makes the show even more fascinating to watch. Here we are, the final part. Let's wrap this up because there's a lot to process. Paedon speaking out about Kody screaming at him as a child isn't just shocking gossip. It's a real window into the Brown family, the dynamics behind the cameras, and the emotional consequences of growing up in such a high-pressure environment. So what do we take away from this? First, childhood experiences matter. The way a parent interacts with their children, the yelling, the emotional intensity, the control leaves marks that can last a lifetime. Paedon's story shows us that even a family on television, seemingly full of drama and quirkiness, has real emotional stakes that we might never fully see. Second, it reminds us that people are complicated. Kody isn't just a villain or a hero. He's a father with flaws, trying to manage a massive family under intense scrutiny. His actions affected his children, but they also reflect the challenges of running a complex household and navigating personal expectations, relationships, and a public life. And finally, it emphasizes the importance of speaking out and reflecting. Paedon's courage in sharing his experience allows viewers to understand, question, and empathize. It also opens the door for conversations about emotional health, family dynamics, and accountability. This is exactly the kind of insight reality television often leaves out, and that's what makes it so eye-opening when someone steps forward. So, what do you think, besties? Are you shocked by Paedon's claim? Does it change how you view Kody and the family? Let's discuss in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts, your takes, and your theories, because this is the kind of story that needs unpacking from multiple angles. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss a deep dive like this. We'll continue following the Brown family, analyzing every claim, every revelation, and every behind-the-scenes moment that TLC doesn't show. Thanks so much for watching, besties. Until next time, remember, understanding the story behind the cameras gives us the full picture, and sometimes the truth is even more shocking than the drama on screen. Bye, besties.